but we specifically set this up to be an RFM pairing session because we're pairing on an issue with website one, but I think we have that in control, and the PR's in, and we're just cleaning up some stuff. So, and we have the RFM stuff that we would like to get working on. So, yeah, I guess, like, let's try not to get distracted on the website one stuff. Like, I mean, maybe Mike feels differently, and if he does, then that's fine. I have other stuff I can work on. And you guys can carry on working on website one. But we started working on seeding the historical data. So, and we didn't get very far, but we have created a branch, and we have looked at the tests, and there are like key differences between the tests and writing them in the seeds file, namely because we don't have access to like factory bot from the seed file. And as Mike pointed out, we don't have access to like travel and time from the seeds, but you responded there. So we're kind of like going to try to work off of your response and start like creating a broadcast and some impressions for that broadcast, and then amending the period of that broadcast.
Yeah, you don't have to travel in.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, I can share my screen and show what I've done, and we could maybe build off of it, or we can like, it's not like I didn't come up with a solution or anything like that. But like maybe you see some stuff that like, I'm not sure, you know this project much better than any of us. Like, so, and potentially this is not even really legible, and there's lots of like just debugging, so I'm not sure if this is helpful. So like, stop me at any time and I won't be offended. I just like was gonna show, I added like in this price session, I added like these times, because that we can reuse, and I added this data, which it seems like we can reuse. And then what I did was I tried to create the broadcast, but then it occurred to me that this create is using like factory bot, so that's not possible. So then I tried to create a broadcast, which is rolled back because it said the broadcast exists. So I went through, I'll skip like my trying to debug that and get to the point where I was actually able to successfully create a broadcast. Which
I use the console many times, but only for small things. I never paid large pieces of code into it. My suggestion would be that you put in a binding price somewhere in the test and inspect what's actually going on there.
Yeah, so there's some key differences. Like I saw that, but there's some key differences to like, so this is a price session, one thing. And the other thing is that in the test, there's like, there's a lot of things going on that will not help us with the seeds.
Yes, they will. I promise you.
Okay.
So
I got to the point where I was able to create a broadcast, and if you take a look at the models, like you have to have a title that's unique, which so we can create unique title in the seed file, and then you have to have a description that's more than 30 characters. So I have that description that's more than 30 characters, and then I've been able to create a broadcast, so we can kind of copy and paste this or something similar to it in the seeds file, and then you gets onto the place where we iterate over the data, and then we create impressions. So that's kind of at the point where I am right now, is creating the impressions, because it's rolling back saying the impression exists, so we need to create like unique impressions, which, yeah.
Why do you need to create unique impressions? I don't know what you mean by that.
Well, you see how here it says like impression exists, and then it rolls back. So if we're in the seeding file, for example, like this is the exact same thing that would happen. So if you just go adding this to the seed file, then when you'll potentially create lots of things until you get to this point where then it tries to create an impression, and then it will just roll back.
Yeah. I guess the uniqueness comes from the combination of user and broadcast. So you're not allowed to vote more than once for one broadcast.
Yeah.
So all you have to do is to create impressions of a user who never voted for a broadcast yet.
Yeah. So I was able to, okay, so that brings me like to where I got, like where I was able to create an impression using like you have to pass in the user, which again, like, I'm not saying you're incorrect, we can definitely have a look at dropping in a pry in the test. But the thing is that with the tests are using like, I can show you, the tests are using, which, I guess you already know, but the tests are using FactoryBot, which has things kind of already set, some things already set up for us, and it has, and potentially things that would help us in the seeding as well, that ensure
FactoryBot in the seed file.
Yeah, but the thing that I guess the thing that the tests don't have is that they clean out the database after every test that's run. So whereas our develop database, which is where we're going to be writing the stuff in the seed file, is not going to do that for us.
Yeah, but it's fine.
So like here, have the impression.
Yeah, that's fine. You can still use FactoryBot for the seed data.
Okay, but like you can use, okay.
So that means this method called association.
Right, so if that's the case,
if you don't pass a user into the method call as an argument, create a new user. That's what association means.
Yeah. Okay. So the thing is that like testing it here in this prize session in the Rails console is going to mimic what is gonna happen in the seeding, correct?
Yeah, but I think it's too complicated the way you do it. I would not use the prize session for large chunks of code.
Can you explain what you mean by large chunks of code? Because I think like one line of code is not a large, that's not what I would consider a large chunk of code.
Yeah, you just lose track of it. You just, what I can see is that you're scrolling down a lot and you did many things and mutated the database. But putting that into a seed file later on will not be very safe, because you don't know what happened in the meantime if you forgot to add state and so on. So I would suggest you that you write code into your seeds file, regularly execute the seeds file. You can also put in a binding pry into the seed file in order to stop at certain points. Yeah. You can also create a database transaction in order to roll back all the changes if something fails.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is that I think that there's no chance that something is not going to fail, because neither Mike nor I know how to create broadcasts and impressions and associations and all that kind of stuff, historical data, without going through a series of debugging. And like I've done debugging with the seed file when doing stuff with Met Plus, for example, and it's extremely slow in comparison to typing in one bit of code here and then getting an automatic failure and then debugging it and then getting another failure and debugging it further until you get something that actually works.
I see.
Do you know what I mean? Like, you can look at, I guess you can look at the timestamps on how long it took me to do this, but it's, this is a lot faster than me running the seed file, unless I happen to put this at the very beginning of the seeds file, and even then, like, it's not, it's not that like
as whatever pleases you most. I find it because I think that state is the root of all evil, and especially old state, which wasn't cleaned up. So this is why I feel more safe when I'm developing a script where I can start from a deterministic state. So
Yeah.
if your database is
Okay.
clean and you run the seed file, the same thing is supposed to happen. While in the binding pry, it's all stored in the database, and with every action, you change the current state.
Yeah.
So other things might happen. So you
So
would
you're
not run the
okay.
uniqueness constraint if you would just run the seeds file. That's what I was suggesting. But if you like it like this, absolutely
No,
like that.
okay. I understand what you're saying. I guess like I hadn't taken into consideration that running the seed file first cleans the database so that you're working from a clean slate in the same way that running a test cleans the database after it's done running.
Yeah, that was my suggestion with the transaction. You can execute things in a transaction, and when you're done, just roll back the transaction, and you're back to your original state. And in the end, you would remove the transaction and just put and you're done. And you can just keep it like that, and you don't have to drop and recreate the database all the time.
I think I missed that last part, but I mean, maybe we could take it a step at a time. Like, I don't know if Mike, if you want to do, does that make sense? What, like, to start writing stuff in the seed, like, especially since we have Robert here. I mean, I think his knowledge of the app would help to be able to drive
Yeah.
the.
Let's do just this for now. So what are you currently working on? Like, what's the problem? The uniqueness constraint here?
I mean, I don't know if there's it's hard to say what the exact problem is because, yeah, I mean, where I got blocked was in creating. Yeah, I think it was that in creating uniqueness for the impressions.
All right, so try to create one impression.
So, Mike, do you want to do that, or are you talking about you're talking about in the seed file, Robert, or are you talking about here?
Nah, the console right here.
I just want to change my provider in a sec, then I'll be back.
Okay. So this is the last way I was creating an impression. So, and then I was doing user.first. But like you said, like the problem with doing it this way is that but let's see what happens. Undefined local. Oh yeah, because
what's the
and then
I would do it one thing first. So data each seems to be an array. You can, for example, make assign data first to D.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So I think it may have saved one and the rest. No, I didn't save any of them because I think I've already have impressions. So I think I might need to clear out my impressions, which is what you're saying is.
I would first of all go step by step. Make the problem smaller in order to investigate things. So first you assign D to, so first you assign D data first to D.
Okay. D equals data dot first.
And now you create that impression. And now you get a rollback, and then you can say impressions, errors, impression errors, yeah. So, and then you have messages is already taken. That's in German because the default locale for the backend is in German. You can also change that, by the way. But the problem here is that your broadcast ID is already taken. Yeah, so there is, I don't know why you only have this message for broadcast ID, not also for the user ID, because both have to be unique. But yeah. So I would say, can you find an impression with this broadcast ID and this impression this user ID? So you could, for example, say impression where broadcast your broadcast user. Given that you have a local variable called broadcast and a local variable called user.
You have for broadcast. I don't think I have for user. I think I was using user.first.
Yeah, and also you can make it a habit to use local variables in a console, because at broadcast an instance variable, it will be nil by default. So you will not see a helpful error message if at broadcast would be nil. Because you can in fact say where broadcast is nil. Yeah, that's a valid SQL statement. But it seems that you have broadcast with an ID number 9, so at broadcast is actually something. And they have broadcast, yeah, that's awesome. And so impression where broadcast user first returns something. And why do you use user first? Like I would also assign user first or your user to something.
Yeah, I did. I just did that.
All right, then you can say impression where broadcast is a broadcast and user is and so on. You know what I mean. And you still have the at.
And then just see if this works. Yeah.
So this gives you an impression, meaning there is already a vote between for this user and that broadcast. You cannot create you cannot create more than one impression for that combination, which makes sense because otherwise you could vote many times. That's something that we want to avoid, and therefore we have this uniqueness constraint. Now, what you want is you could, for example, take that impression and create some historical data for it. All right? So you have that impression and a list of historic entries. That would be impression.history. These are the history records, and it seems that there's only one. Can you make it, can you double check it by saying impression.history.count? 56. Okay, interesting. That's very interesting. Yeah, but there you can see the validity. So taking the first one and the first one having a validity of nil for the future, that makes sense.
Yeah, so this here doesn't look like it's the history. It just looks like what the history, like the schema of the history, right?
It seems to be an object which responds to .count.
Because you have like, sorry, you have, I have too many things open. You have, way too many things open. Then in the test that you shared with us, you have that.
Yeah.
Here, so hit impression.history.first, and then I can do class amend period.
Yeah, it seems like this is not really an array, but it's something. It's like a collection object, and then you can say .first, which gives you one history thing, like the so
which
you have
I guess like this. Sorry.
So apparently there are 56 records for this historical data. And here you can say age, which is one of those things, class, which gives you the class of that thing, and then there's a class method. This is called amend period. It takes an ID, and it takes the two dates.
Yeah. So I guess the point is that the reason it's getting caught here is because using this factory bot gives us with it a different user every time. So we
Yeah,
need
because the
to,
user is not given here, so you cannot see a user. That means it's creating a user for you.
yeah, exactly. But so I guess like if I did here before, like impression, well, I don't know. Let's see if I did before. Factory bot dot create, and then I say impression, and then I have
Does it actually
broadcast.
work? Can you see if that actually works? Can you just create one impression for me?
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
work. Nice. Cool.
So, and I do have D because D is the first one, right?
I don't know what
For
D is.
broadcast.
D is first record of data. I don't know what data is.
Data is the same thing it is in the test.
But why do you say D and then broadcast? Well, what is D?
D is the first data. I just said it's
Okay, so we have
the,
an array of broadcast things, and we just keep track of. Yeah, it's up to you. You don't have to use it. For me, it was easier to read because I had the broadcast ID, then the
oh,
amount.
sorry.
So that was
Sorry.
just easier to read.
Yeah, I'm copying the wrong thing. Sorry. So I want to do broadcast here. I want to do broadcast because I have broadcast. Then I want to do response, which is going to be positive or negative, and we have a D there, which is going to be, I think, positive. The first response is
You can also just say positive
positive, right? Okay.
and make it a symbol. It's now a local variable. You have to put a
Yeah.
colon with the positive.
Yeah. And then amount, and then I can pass in an integer.
Yeah, just keep in mind that you can one user cannot assign more than 70 or 50 in total. So if the user
70.
has other impressions, they might block you from creating more impressions.
So that created it. Right.
That
Cool.
needed.
That was easy. So, but I guess the thing is that in the seed file, we will probably want to do this iteration where it's creating like, I mean, this seems to make sense to me.
Yeah, I think you can basically just copy and paste this whole thing and just put a factory bot in front of create and just run the seed data.
Well,
And
why wasn't that working earlier? Because I tried that and it wasn't working.
yeah, well then let's try to figure it out.
It was getting to this point here, and then it was getting to here, and it was saying that this was nil. This H was nil. So I mean, I have this already.
Yeah, just let's put that into the seed file and then we'll see.
I guess I don't know if Mike, if you want to do, or if I should just carry on doing. I didn't really.
Yeah.
First, I would check if running the seed file actually works. So drop your database, create it, run the seed file.
Okay, so I can. This.
And I think you can, instead of saying create migrate, you can also say schema load. It's faster than running the migrations.
Oh yeah. Schema load.
So, and enter. Yeah, I think you cannot run the DB in one go, and you have to install the dependencies.
You can't run the schema load and the DB on the one line.
No, I think there's a bug in Rails that prevents you from running drop, create, migrate, followed by seed. So you have to execute one command more.
I guess like it probably makes more sense to Mike to drive this because I don't even have the branch locally. I'm out here on master, you know, like.
That's fine. Well, okay, Mike.
Okay, I think. Yeah, but there are a few things I'm still struggling with. I think maybe I don't understand what exactly the factory bot is and what in this case I was assuming the response is whatever whatever input we get from the user, and there's this point where you can call response dot history, like those I still I don't really understand maybe the flow there. Yeah, but for the current task, I think you should backend and look for the seed file. Oh.
So I guess real quick, factory bots is something is like a helper that we can use when we're writing tests. That, but I guess I didn't realize that we could use in the seed as well.
Yeah, factory bot is just a helper. So in general, you have your tests go like this. You have 3 steps: setup, action, assertion.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have some data. You want to bring your system into a state where you can run an action. And the setup is in many cases that you want to have a certain situation in the database. In that you want to have a user, some broadcast, some votes, whatever, right? So that's setup.
Yes.
Then you do something. In the test case, that was you want to run a method and see what are the statistics at a certain point of time. That's where you travel to a certain point of time, and then you say, "Give me the data now." That's the action. And the assertion is that you have something that you would expect, like that's what I put into the test. Maybe you can show it in the test, actually, Mike.
Here.
Sure. Checking.
Maybe.
I think this is not the one that we were looking into. I think it's statistics.
Statistics. Okay.
Yeah, and then maybe.
Yeah.
Spec request statistic broadcast spec. All right.
Because
so the whole setup is in the before block. That's the whole database setup, right? So there's much more which we have to do in order to get the system into a state to run some action. This is the whole setup thing. And then you scroll down. And then there's describe, blah, blah, blah. And then, for example, describe T1.
Yeah.
And then you have the subject, which apparently changes. So the subject is on line 53.
Yes.
And it's, yeah, so before response, then request, so it's doing some kind of request. Can you see what is a request? Can you scroll up a little bit?
Yeah.
There we go. So request is get URL params headers. Params and headers are empty by default, as you can see in line number 5 and 6. So it's getting the URL. The URL is what? Can you show you?
It's down. Scroll down a little bit more. There, statistics broadcast 4711.
And also, could you? Which screen am I looking on? Ah, there's Mike. Yeah, okay. Okay, this is the URL. So apparently, the test is doing the following. After it has done this test setup, it's saying request. It's requesting with no parameter the statistics for broadcast 4711, as you can see in the URL.
Mm-hmm.
But before it's doing it, it's always changing the time to each time step. That's what you can see in line number 56, 61, 66, and it has all an impact on the data, as you can see, because in the next line, you can see the new result. So if you go to the exact same URL with the exact same data, but you check it out at a different time, you get different data back.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we're testing in here, right? The test setup is creating all the data and preparing the time steps like T1, T3, T4, and so on, right? It's all there. That's the test setup. Then you do this action, which is the request. Yeah, so you send an HTTP request to that URL. That's your action. And then you get a response. And then you check what's in the response. That's the assertion. So here we have the 3 steps: setup, action, expectation.
Yeah.
Okay. And FactoryBot helps you with the test setup because it's sometimes a very complicated database setup. And it is, especially in this test. The database setup is rather complex. We need this broadcast with the ID 4711.
Mm-hmm.
We need some impressions for that broadcast. This is what we do in the setup above. We want to keep track of all the different time steps when we do it.
Yes.
So we have to put these timestamps somewhere. That's all the setup, and FactoryBot helps us with the database. It's just a helper. Does it make sense?
Yes. Hello?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Yeah, it makes sense that the bot helps with setting up stuff so that when you do your assertions, you have things at least you can assert against.
Say it again.
Yeah.
Say it again, please.
Yeah. The FactoryBot helps with the creating the setup process. For example, setting up the database, like creating the data, so that when we are doing it around in the tests, the FactoryBot, there can be data we are asserting against, and this setup maybe is done just before the tests are done.
Yes, just for the test setup. FactoryBot creates some data. You have some kind of blueprint, a factory, and in the test, you only specify the data that you actually need. So if you scroll up a little bit, so you can, for example, see that you pass in broadcast, the response, amount.
That's in line 28.
So on line number 30, that's where you create the impression.
Yes.
The first parameter is the name of the factory. That's impression. Then you pass in the broadcast. Then you pass in the response, and then you pass in the amount, and that's it. An impression will need a user, but the user is irrelevant here in this test. We don't care about the user. And that's why we don't have it here. FactoryBot just creates a user if you don't give it a user.
Okay.
Yeah. In other test cases, it might be important who was the person who created that vault. But in this test case, we don't care about it because we just want to go, certain timestamp. It doesn't matter at all who has voted for that broadcast. All right?
Yes.
And my suggestion was you can basically copy that entire test setup and put it into the seeds file. That should work.
But then how about this history? Is it so, and I understand what the impression is now, since we are creating it right here. But how about
that's a special method for the impression. The impression is tracked or enriched by a library that we use, which is called Chrono Model. And this library is creating an additional table for this impression thing. Maybe please go into the model definition of impression.
model?
Model impression. Yeah.
Models.
Oh, by the way,
Impression,
it's 8 o'clock. We should start the. Yeah. So there you see on line number 2, include Chrono Model Time Machine.
Yeah.
And this makes the impression, each impression, it gives it a method called history. And that's why we can say impression.history. It's doing many other things, but yeah, and most importantly, it's creating this second table to keep track of all the changes.
Okay. Makes sense.
That's where it comes from. Shall we publish the link to this Hangout? Is it possible that we can reuse this Hangout, maybe?
We can. No, because if I stop the broadcast, then it will. Or not. I'm sorry. Mike started it.
Okay,
if Mike stops,
it's all right. I will create a new broadcast for us. Okay.
Okay.
Go.
So I will leave this call for now, go to YouTube, create a new live event, go back and then push it to, and so on and so on. See you later.
Well, see you in a second. Thank you.
Um,
Mike, do you want to get started on writing some of this, or do you want to, because it's going to take him a minute to do that?
Yeah, I think I can get started because oh, Joseph joined. Hi, Joseph.
Hi.
Oh, this guy. So
Matt, my tests are passing, all of them.
Yeah. Nice, man.
Yeah. What a time to be alive, right?
I don't know. There's this feeling where you get like when I pushed the first time, I was like, man, I don't know anything. But now when they are passing, I feel good. Like I know everything. I say, yeah, give me some more. What you got for me? But then when the things start falling, then you feel like,
Nice.
yeah, when things are not working.
Matt, it seems he has created it already.
Okay, cool. So I guess I'll see you in a second.
All right.